Hi everyone, welcome back to Rabbi's Reflection. I'm glad that you're joining with us today. We'll be continuing with our reading of Kitchen Table Wisdom by Dr. Naomi Remen, today reading the story titled In Darkness. Stay with us as we read through the story and then offer some reflections. Light in various forms is commonly regarded as symbolic of the energies of healing. Many self-help books use the sun in healing meditations and imageries. Those of my patients who have read these books have come to expect light to symbolize the source of their healing. But things are not always as we have come to expect, and the mysterious may surprise us as it did these two men. The first, a salesman, was referred by his physician because his denial of his disease made it difficult for him to take care of himself. Over and over again, he would do foolhardy things like lifting heavy boxes soon after abdominal surgery and forgetting his medications when he traveled. Essential treatment had been delayed or even sabotaged several times, and he had suffered a great deal of unnecessary illness because of this. Just prior to his visit, he had developed a drug toxicity and all but lost the strength in his right arm. During the 3 days it had taken him to notice this, he continued to take the medication. He finally called his physician only when his wife pointed out to him that he was dropping things. His doctor had taken him off the offending medication. Frightened by the possibility of permanent damage to the nerve in his arm, he had agreed to seek counseling. In our initial conversation, he described his cancer as, quote, "this black hole in the middle of my life that keeps pulling me in," end quote. When an image appears like this in the course of ordinary conversation, it is rarely random and may tell us as much about a person's unconscious world, their deepest attitudes and beliefs, as the contents of their dreams. Without our knowing it, the dream maker in us may whisper our secrets directly to others. Steve's choice of words suggested that he was using all his strength to resist a pull, not to surrender to the force of the disease in his life. Perhaps for him, paying attention to his symptoms and taking prescribed medications came under the heading of surrender. I called his attention to the picture in his words and suggested that it might be saying something important about himself and his life. Perhaps so much of his energy was being used up in resistance that it did not leave him a lot left over to live with. He nodded. I asked him what was in the hole. "Just darkness," he said simply. I invited him to explore this with me in his imagination, to allow himself to be pulled into the hole just to see what it was like. He hesitated only for a moment. Then he closed his eyes and began to enter into his own image. He imagined himself pulled into the hole, into the darkness. The following comments are from my session notes. Each one is separated by several minutes of silence. There is darkness. Big darkness. I am floating. The darkness is very soft, gentle. It supports me. I have no needs here. I'm tired. I am at rest, totally at rest. Every cell is resting. Every cell is open. I'm filling up with life. I could not fill up because I could not open up. Let go. I can open up in the darkness. Life is everywhere. Whatever happens, it will be okay. The second man, caught up in rage at his cancer and its treatment, responded to the question, "What do you think may be needed for your healing?" with a terse, "Nothing." Taking his statement at face value, I asked him to describe nothing to me. "Unending darkness," he said. Commenting on the power of that image, I encouraged him to close his eyes and allow himself to experience it. As his face became more and more relaxed, I asked him how he was feeling. Again, these comments from my session notes are each separated by several minutes of silence. The darkness is all around me. I'm not falling. It holds me. I am held in darkness, wrapped in darkness. The darkness is soft, almost tender. It's safe here. I needed to feel safe. I haven't relaxed since I got the diagnosis. I can rest. I am so tired. No pain here, no hunger, no need. I encouraged him to let himself relax fully. Watching him, it was apparent that he had slipped into a light trance or doze. I covered him with a soft wool blanket that I keep in my office. After a while, he commented that he could hear a sound, like a great heartbeat. It was deeply comforting. I encouraged him to lean up against it, to rest. Soon he began to weep softly, saying, "Mama, Mama." Another patient with cancer, a woman, told me of a dream. She turns a corner on a familiar street and is suddenly confronted by a black-cloaked figure. I call out for help, but there is no one. I am utterly alone with this dark figure. As I turn to flee, the cloak is thrown over me. I struggle, but there is no one in the cloak, only darkness. It is black, totally black, but somehow I can see. Not with my eyes. The blackness goes on forever. It is very quiet, completely silent, velvety, soft. I am not floating. I am not falling. I am floating in endless darkness, floating. I am free. There is no gravity. My body does not hurt anymore. The darkness is like love. It's very, very good here. It takes me in exactly as I am. There's no judgment. I am not wrong. I just am. These patients and the many others who have had such experiences were taken by surprise by the power of their spontaneous imagery and its form. We often think of health and sickness as an expression of the goodness-evil polarity. Most languages reflect this identification. We say, quote, "I feel bad," end quote, when we feel sick, and, quote, "I feel good," end quote, when we recover. Darkness and light are a further expression of this polarity. Healing, as a function of the good, is associated with light, and sickness, as a function of evil, is associated with darkness. Darkness has suffered bad press for millennia. Yet, is it really so surprising that spontaneous healing imagery may present itself in this way? According to the traditions of alchemy, darkness was the necessary condition for purification and transformation. Alchemists put impure dross metals into a sealed flask, creating the perfect darkness required for the transformation into pure gold. As light represents the archetype of masculine energy, darkness suggests the power of the feminine, and it makes an intuitive sense that the experience of healing may be associated with darkness. Darkness is a condition of the beginning. The body first comes into being in darkness. It is nurtured as a seed in darkness. Some people may find their healing in remembering the beginning. In this story, Dr. Remen challenges us to think about the polarities that we have in our life, the structures or the ways in which we think that kind of guide our life. Here she talks specifically about light and darkness. Light usually associated with healing, which is usually associated as something good, and darkness, which is then associated with sickness, and then thought of as something evil. And she brings us 3 different stories from her own practice, in which there are individuals who connect to darkness, who find healing in darkness. And I think what I'm left with is this sense of being open to a larger experience, being open to a sense that perhaps the world or the way that I see it doesn't have to necessarily be that way. It doesn't have to be that darkness is bad. just in the same way that it doesn't have to be that light is good. But specifically, I want to focus on the fact that darkness doesn't necessarily have to be bad. Perhaps, in the words of Dr. Remen, darkness is a condition of beginning. We all need darkness in order to get to a place of light. She likens it to the darkness of the womb. That is a dark place, but it's necessary for that darkness to exist before the baby is born into the world, before creation can happen and light can exist. And so, in a sense, it's flipping this separation or this dichotomy on its head. We might have thought before that all you needed was light, and that darkness you should probably keep as far away from as possible. But here she says it's the opposite. Actually, in order to have that light in your life, the necessary preconditions are for darkness to exist. Darkness is there for a sense of purification or transformation. To take this another step further, and I say this with humility, and perhaps this might not sit well with everyone, but I want to put it out there, is that perhaps the dark moments of our life, perhaps moments where we feel down, where we experience challenge, perhaps those are moments that can bring us to light. They aren't moments that we want. They aren't moments that we enjoy. And often we want to push away those moments, rightfully so. But what I think this story and what Dr. Remen is trying to convey to us is that sometimes our unconscious world or our conscious world brings us to a place of darkness. And instead of pushing that away, perhaps we can try to embrace that world, to think about what darkness might actually teach us, might help inform us on our pathway towards light and towards a greater sense of healing.